I'm Emily Parker, 28, and at my family's dinner table, I thought it would be another night of forced smiles and shallow laughter. The plates were polished, the chandelier blinding, and every word tossed across the table carried the same edge it always did. Then my mother looked at me, smiled like it was a joke, and said, "You weren't even supposed to be here. Thank your brother for keeping you around." Everyone laughed, except him. My brother pushed back his chair, stood, and revealed the truth I had never planned to share. I was the one paying for all of it: the house, the trips, the lifestyle they flaunted as their own. That night didn't just expose a secret. It shattered the script my family had rehearsed for years. And none of us would leave the table the same. The table stretched longer than it had any right to be, polished wood gleaming beneath the chandelier's glare, a dozen dishes laid out in practiced symmetry. It was supposed to look impressive, but to me it always felt more like a stage. Every plate, every neatly folded napkin, every vase of carefully arranged flowers, props in a play where the actors were my family. And like any performance, the lines had been rehearsed for years. The laughter was loud, but the edges were sharp. The smiles were wide, but behind them sat contempt. I sat in the middle, caught between voices that clashed and overlapped, each person determined to be louder than the next. My uncle was telling a story about his promotion. My aunt corrected him, insisting he was exaggerating. My cousins argued over who had the better car. My father barely spoke, content to nod and chew as though silence would save him from the crossfire. My mother, she thrived in it, presiding over the chaos like a queen on her throne. Her laugh cut above the rest, deliberate and rehearsed, and when she wasn't laughing, she was watching. Always watching. It was during one of those silences, brief but heavy, when her eyes locked on me. I had felt them before. The weight of her scrutiny, the smirk tugging at her lips, but this time, she didn't hold back. She lifted her glass, tilted her head as though she had just remembered something amusing, and said the words that cracked the air like thunder. "You weren't even supposed to be here," she said, smiling in that cruel, practiced way. "You should thank your brother for keeping you around." The words landed harder than any shout could have. For a second, I wondered if I'd misheard, but the quick eruption of laughter around the table confirmed I hadn't. My aunt laughed so hard, she dabbed her eyes with her napkin. My cousins leaned into each other, whispering between chuckles. Even my father, who usually stayed out of such things, let out a short laugh that died in his throat when he noticed I wasn't laughing too. I kept my face still, the way I had learned to. Years of being their punchline had trained me not to flinch. Inside, though, I felt the sting. I swallowed it down, forced my eyes to remain calm, and focused on cutting the food on my plate into small, precise pieces. If they wanted a reaction, they weren't going to get one. But what I didn't expect was my brother. I could feel him tense beside me before he moved. His hand tightened around his fork until his knuckles paled, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he set it down. The scrape of metal against porcelain silenced even the laughter. He pushed back his chair, stood tall, and raised his voice against her. "Enough." The words sliced through the room, sharp and final. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks froze in midair. All eyes shifted to him, waiting, uncertain, because my brother was never the one to disrupt the script. He was the golden child, the one who never faltered, the one who carried the family's pride like a banner. His voice had always been their comfort. Tonight it was a blade. "If anyone deserves thanks here," he said, his voice steady, unshaken, "it's her." He pointed toward me, not with a gesture of blame, but with a conviction that drew every eye back to me. "She's the one paying for your vacations, your shopping, even the roof over this house. Every single one of you is living off her hard work." Silence followed, not the casual kind, but the kind that smothered. My mother's grin faltered, as though she had miscalculated a move in her own game. My aunt lowered her glass without a word. My cousins stopped smirking, shifting in their seats with nervous glances. No one spoke because no one knew how to counter what he had just revealed. I hadn't wanted it exposed. My brother knew that. For months, maybe years, I had carried their weight quietly, paying bills behind the scenes, covering debts without ever demanding acknowledgement. It was easier to let them believe their world was intact, even if it was built on my back. But now the truth hung in the air, undeniable, and it was their turn to feel the burn of humiliation. I finally lifted my glass, slow and deliberate, and let the silence stretch a little longer. My smile wasn't wide like my mother's, wasn't forced or sharp. It was calm, measured, and it carried the authority they had never expected from me. "You're welcome," I said, my voice steady, not loud but carrying enough weight that no one dared speak over it. "But don't ever mistake my silence for weakness again." The words landed like a closing door, final and unyielding. I set my glass back down, the clink of it against the table louder than the laughter had been minutes earlier. No one laughed now. No one spoke. Even the chandelier above seemed to dim under the heaviness of the moment. My mother's eyes narrowed, but she had no ready comeback. She looked at me, truly looked, as though seeing me differently than before. The queen had been challenged, and the court was waiting to see what she would do next. But she said nothing, and that silence told me everything. The dinner continued, but it wasn't the same. Plates were pushed aside half-eaten. Glasses remained untouched. The conversations that followed were stilted, cautious, as though everyone was trying not to break the thin glass wall that now surrounded us. My uncle muttered something about work. My aunt asked about the weather. My cousins scrolled their phones under the table, pretending they hadn't just witnessed the foundation of the family shift in a single moment. The silence from that night didn't end when the plates were cleared. It carried into the air like a shadow that refused to fade. By morning, the house didn't hum with its usual arrogance. No loud laughter, no idle chatter, no careless remarks about money or vacations. Instead, the halls felt heavy, each door closed, each voice muted. My words had wedged themselves into their minds, and I knew they were all replaying them, each in their own way, wondering how long I had been the one holding up the weight of their comfort. I woke early, as I always did, slipping into the quiet routine that had become second nature. Coffee, phone calls, scanning through emails. My brother appeared in the doorway, hair unkempt, expression harder than I'd seen in years. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You shouldn't have had to say it," he told me. His voice was low, almost regretful. "I should have stopped her years ago." I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked, and realized how much pressure he'd been carrying himself, playing the golden son, shielding me where he could, protecting an image that wasn't his to hold. He had been their defense against me, but also mine against them. And now, by siding with me, he had broken the only illusion keeping this family together. "They'll come after you," I finally said, stirring my coffee slowly. "Not directly, but they'll find ways. They can't stand losing control." He leaned against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck. "Then let them. Maybe it's time they see what it's like without you carrying them." The thought had already crossed my mind. For years, I had written checks without complaint, covered expenses with quiet precision, erased debts before anyone noticed. They believed their stability came from their own efforts, but the truth had always been mine to manage. And now that it was out in the open, they would either scramble to deny it or fight to twist it against me. Either way, the game had shifted. By the afternoon, I saw the first signs. My aunt, who usually avoided me unless she wanted something, appeared with a plate of cookies as though that could erase decades of mockery. Her smile was sweet, her words too polished. She asked about my work, pretended to be interested in the long hours, the deals, the meetings. I watched her carefully, noting the way her eyes flickered every time I didn't give her the answers she wanted. She wasn't here to make peace. She was here to measure me, to gauge whether the power my brother had exposed was temporary or permanent. That evening, I overheard my cousins whispering in the next room. They spoke in quick, urgent tones, throwing my name into every sentence. They wondered how much money I really had, whether I'd been hiding it, whether I'd planned to let them all live off me without ever telling them. Their paranoia was thick, and in it, I could hear the jealousy forming. To them, my strength was a threat. My mother, however, stayed quiet. That silence was more dangerous than all the whispers combined. She didn't storm into my room, didn't raise her voice, didn't scold my brother for betraying her. She moved through the house with a calmness that felt deliberate, like someone planning their next move instead of reacting to the last one. When she finally did speak, it wasn't to me. It was to everyone else. I found them in the living room, gathered like loyal subjects around their queen. She spoke softly, carefully, each word measured. She told them not to let one night undo the family. She told them appearances mattered, that strength meant unity, that no one person should hold more power than the rest. Her eyes never met mine, but her words were for me. It was her way of warning me that I might have won the battle, but the war wasn't finished. Later, my father tried to smooth the tension in his usual way, by pretending none of it existed. He came to me with a hesitant smile, told me I shouldn't take my mother's words too seriously. "You know how she gets," he said, as though cruelty was simply her nature, unchangeable, acceptable. I let him speak, let him pat my shoulder, but inside, I felt the same resolve as the night before. I wasn't going to shrink back into silence. The turning point came 2 days later. We had gathered again, though the mood was nothing like the first dinner. The table wasn't as full, the conversations were clipped, and even the food seemed less extravagant. My mother sat at the head as always, her posture rigid, her smile absent. I knew something was coming the moment she raised her fork and set it down without taking a bite. She turned to me slowly, her eyes sharp, her voice calm. "If you've been helping the family, we should acknowledge that," she said. "But we should also discuss balance. No one person should have all the responsibility. It isn't fair to you. It isn't fair to us." On the surface, her words sounded reasonable. But beneath them, I heard the true intent, to pull me back into line, to reduce my position from strength to obligation. She wanted me to agree, to admit I had carried too much, to let her reframe my sacrifices as burdens instead of power. I set my fork down as well, mirroring her. "Balance," I repeated, my tone even. "That's interesting. Because balance would have meant not mocking me for years. Balance would have meant respect when I stayed quiet. Balance would have meant acknowledgement before the truth was dragged out in front of everyone." The room froze again. My brother glanced at me, a flicker of both pride and worry in his eyes. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, my cousins lowered their gaze. My mother didn't flinch. She leaned back, hands folded neatly in her lap, and smiled. "You've grown bold," she said. "But boldness doesn't last forever. Families have long memories." It was a threat, wrapped neatly in maternal authority, and everyone knew it. I smiled back, not with defiance, but with certainty. "Then remember this too," I told her. "You needed me more than I ever needed you." The silence that followed wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. I could see the way her jaw tightened, the way her fingers dug slightly into her folded hands. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked cornered. That night, when I went upstairs, I heard voices again. They weren't whispers this time. They were arguments, sharp, loud, desperate. My cousins accusing each other of favoritism, my aunt accusing my mother of losing her grip, my father begging them all to calm down. The unity she had promised them was already cracking, and I hadn't lifted a finger. I sat on my bed, listening, letting their voices wash over me. For years, I had been their quiet foundation, holding everything steady while they lived as though the world revolved around them. Now they were collapsing under their own weight, and all I had done was tell the truth. The storm didn't come in shouts or slamming doors. It came in invitations. My mother was careful, deliberate, orchestrating one last family dinner as though nothing had happened. She called it a chance to reset, her voice sweet, measured, promising peace. No one believed it, but no one dared refuse. That's how she worked, masking her strikes in civility, cloaking her weapons in tradition. When the night came, the house was set as if nothing had cracked beneath it. The table gleamed, the chandelier glowed, the plates were lined with precision. Every detail screamed control, an attempt to restore what had been lost. But underneath, the tension was visible: tight shoulders, careful glances, silence broken only by the clink of silverware. I sat across from her, steady, calm. My brother at my side, loyal but wary. My father avoided my eyes, pretending to focus on the meal. My aunt and cousins watched everything like spectators at a play they didn't understand but couldn't leave. It didn't take long for her to begin. She placed her fork down, looked at me directly, and smiled. Not warm, not cruel, but calculating. "This family has survived because we stay united," she said. "No matter what happens, we don't turn against each other. We lift one another, we share the weight. That's how it has always been." The words were crafted to sound noble, but everyone at the table knew they were aimed like arrows. She was rewriting history, erasing years of mockery and exploitation, painting the past as a picture of unity. And if anyone dared contradict her, she would call it betrayal. I let her speak, let the room absorb her performance. When she finished, I didn't rush. I set my glass down carefully and met her gaze. "Unity?" I asked. "That's what you call it?" Unity would have meant respect. Unity would have meant valuing me before you needed me. What you call unity was dependency, and dependency without gratitude is nothing but control. My words weren't loud, but they carried. My brother shifted forward slightly, his support clear even without a word. My aunt dropped her gaze. My cousins exchanged nervous looks. My father exhaled slowly, but said nothing. My mother didn't blink. "You think money is power," she said, her voice colder now. "But power doesn't come from a paycheck. It comes from loyalty, from history, from family bonds that last longer than any job." Her argument was sharp, but it didn't cut. She was trying to strip my strength down to numbers, to reduce me back to silence. What she didn't realize was that the silence had broken for good. "Power," I said, leaning slightly forward, "comes from choice. I chose to carry you when I didn't have to. I chose to pay for your comforts, your trips, your bills. And I can choose to stop. That's the difference between us. You demand loyalty. I give it until it's wasted." The air tightened. My brother nodded, his eyes locked on her. My aunt swallowed hard. My cousins froze. Everyone understood what I had just said. The threat wasn't in my tone, it was in the truth. Their lives depended on me, and that dependence could end at my word. For the first time, my mother's mask cracked. Her fingers twitched against the tablecloth. Her smile faltered. She looked at me with a mix of anger and something else she had never shown before: fear. "You wouldn't," she said, not as a question, as a plea. I held her gaze steady. "I already have." Gasps echoed around the table. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. My cousins leaned forward, confusion mixing with panic. My brother's jaw tightened, but his silence confirmed he had known. My father's fork clattered against his plate. They didn't understand yet, but they would. For weeks I had been preparing, quietly redirecting accounts, cutting ties, moving assets. The safety net they believed would always catch them was already gone. The house, the cars, the comforts, they were no longer secured by my work. They were living on borrowed time, and the clock had already started. "You've all had your chance," I continued, my voice calm but unyielding. "I gave more than I needed to. I stayed quiet when you mocked me. I stayed generous when you dismissed me. But that ends tonight. From now on, you stand on your own. No more hidden payments. No more lifelines." The room broke into chaos. My aunt demanded explanations. My cousin shouted questions. My father begged for patience. My brother remained still, his silence a shield between me and the storm. My mother, however, stayed seated, her expression hardening as the reality sank in. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She stared at me as though memorizing my face, realizing she had lost control and could never get it back. Finally, she spoke. "If you walk away, you'll destroy this family." I shook my head. "No, I'm giving it the chance to be real for the first time. A family that only survives on someone else's back isn't a family. It's a burden, and I won't carry it anymore." Silence followed again, thicker than before. No one moved. No one spoke. The chandelier above flickered slightly, casting shifting light across their stunned faces. I stood, pushing my chair back with deliberate calm, and picked up my glass. To the future, I said simply, raising it. The one I choose. I drank, set it down, and walked away from the table. My brother rose instantly, following me without hesitation. Behind us, the voices rose again. Anger, fear, desperation, but they no longer touched me. Their noise was theirs to keep. My silence was mine to command.